straight from the heart. A very good evening and a warm welcome to all our listeners across Sri Lanka and all over the world. You're tuned into this special broadcast on Radio Sri Lanka over the airwaves of Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. In this program, we regularly feature prominent Sri Lankan personalities who have excelled in sports, education, business, and a host of other selected professions. This forum will feature a straight from the heart and open discussion with no holds barred as we seek to understand what it requires to achieve and taste success. And in today's segment, dear listeners, very interesting discussion coming up, straight from the heart. We are extremely proud to feature an exemplary figure who no doubt go into the annals of the proud history of our beloved country. A man with honor, duty and love for the country, believed and practiced at the highest possible level. An individual whom we can call a true patriot, for whom safeguarding freedom and territorial integrity and our people became a lifelong mission. It is with immense pride and gratitude we warmly welcome and say a very good evening to a very unassuming, soft-spoken, humble and individual, nevertheless to many who know of his achievements, a hero. Good evening, Major General Nirmal Dharmaratne.
Good evening, Ashley. Thank you very much for that kind introduction of me and also for calling me to the SLBC studio. And I'm really glad to be here.
It's absolutely our pleasure, sir. And I'm sure everybody who's listening to this program, proud Sri Lankans everywhere. General, 3 decades have passed. Perhaps a period very difficult for another to emulate. A distinguished, illustrious career and service to the nation. When you retired from active service in the rank of Deputy Chief of Staff of the Sri Lanka Army, was it a tough call when you made that decision and also coinciding with your birthday as well?
To be honest, it is. It was tough and heartbreaking to hang the uniform which I wore with a lot of pride for the last 35 long years. It is like that all good things must come to an end. So is our service in the army. So as per the service criteria we have in the services, when we reach the age of 55, we have to retire because the army belongs only to young people. That doesn't mean I'm old, but that is the age bracket stipulated for army officers. So when I reached my 55th birthday on the 19th April 2020, I had to call it a day. In the military, Ashley, as you may surely know, that we spend a strictly regimented lifestyle. In fact, it is said that the military service alone, that itself is a way of life. So as against normal civilian, we do many things differently. That includes our daily routine of work, the way we dress, the way we behave, etc. etc. So this was a kind of a transformation to another way of life. This transformation was hard more mentally than physically. But having said that, I must tell you that the period I served in the army was extremely challenging. Perhaps, not to exaggerate, the most challenging period in the entire military history of Sri Lanka. Because in the year 1985, when I joined the army, the LTT insurgency had just begun. And that the Elam War, we know that was fought for about 27 years. It was 4 phases actually. So in between, our country faced other issues like the JP insurrection, that subversion in the south, which armed forces are called upon to handle it. And in the last year, there was this attack by radical Islamic extremists. So actually I would say that the whole period of my service in the army was marred by armed conflicts. But now almost 5 months passed since I left the army. I have now made up my mind. In fact, to tell you frankly, I now begin to love my new life because I feel that I am relieved, I'm relaxed, I'm sort of embracing freedom. No strings attached, not reporting to anyone, more time with my family, a completely new life.
Sir, you're looking absolutely fit, looking absolutely smart, as a general should be. Once a serviceman, always a serviceman.
It is.
Many accolades and rightly awarded for your brilliant contribution throughout your service period. Far too numerous to mention. For the benefit of our listeners, can you elaborate what some of these gallantry medals are for?
I have been able to receive certain medals like the Veera Vikram Vibhushane, Rana Vikrama Padakkama, Rana Sura Padakkama, and those are gallantry medals. And there are some service medals like North and East Operations Medal, Vadamarachi Campaign Medal, Reviras Operations Medal, Purna Bhumi Medal, and all that. There are a lot of medals. So most of us who served in the military during the period from 1985 to 2009, we were able to earn these medals because we fought in the war.
So I need to interrupt you for a very brief, for the benefit of our listeners, the Veera Vikrama Vibhushanaya. This is a medal, third highest military decoration awarded to any military person in Sri Lanka for individual acts of gallantry, conspicuous bravery of a military nature, of a higher order in the face of enemy, performed voluntarily while on active service, without regard for your own security.
Yes, I will explain the story of my being awarded with the Veera Vikram Vibhushana medal. Before that, I must tell you, Ashley, that this, as far as the gallantry medals I have received are concerned, I'm ever so grateful to my colleagues in the Gajaba Regiment and the Special Forces who fought alongside me, without whom I wouldn't have received these medals. Because in the army, we perform duties as a group, as a team, collectively. There is no individual brilliance. It is true that these medals are awarded for individual acts of bravery, but you can't do that without others in your group. It is like in any other team game, like in football, forwards, the strikers have the opportunity to score goals. But how can they do that if the ball is not served to them properly by the backs? So each medal has its own eligibility criteria. This talking about this Veera Vikram Vibhushane medal, I was awarded the Veera Vikram Vibhushane medal for my role in the Puduguduruppu battle in 2009. So if I may recall that incident, that was on about the last week of January 2009, during the humanitarian military operation. We were engaged in a series of intense battles against LTT terrorists in and around Puduguduruppu. So it was their last stronghold that was left at that time, because by the time we reached Puduguduruppu, we have had all other LTT strongholds overrun, defeated. By that time, even the LTT leader, Prabhakaran, had been trapped in that small enclave of Nandikandal, which is a place close to Puduguduruppu. So he put everything he had, from suicide carders of black tigers to explosive-laden armored vehicles, and his snipers, his indirect fire weapons like the artillery and mortar, everything he had, simply every combat resources he would have had at that time to breach the army defenses and escape. So there was no other way out for him, as I believe. So the situation became even more catastrophic when LTT launched a large-scale attack on one of our brigades, 593 Brigade, if I'm remembering it right, and pushed us about 4 kilometers to the south. It was a major reversal on our part. Now there was a big hole in our defenses now. The LTT could have any moment entered into our area, and that could have been a disaster. The 2 years of successes we gained by fighting our way through from, the operations in the north started from Vavuniya and up to Nattikandal. It was a distance about 80 kilometers. The successes we gained by then up to now would have been in vain if it had happened.
General, I need to interrupt you once here very briefly as we go in for a first break, and we will continue these very strategic and the most decisive moments of the military battle of Sri Lanka. And dear listeners, yes, you are listening to this exclusively and live from the studios of Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation as we talk to you with Major General Dharmaratne on those decisive days of the war. All on the other side as we come back to you after this break.
By the people, for the people. The state service where the nation is the center.
Welcome back, listeners. And anyone tuning in now, we are listening to an exclusive straight from the heart chat with Major General Nirmal Dharmaratne, officer of the Sri Lankan Army with an unblemished, distinguished career of more than 3 decades, spanning the entire theatre of Sri Lanka's war period. Yes, we were talking about those most decisive moments which perhaps changed the entire complexion of the war front and brought peace and harmony to our nation. General, we were talking a very, very critical period of the war. Can you please continue?
Yeah, you're talking about this Puthukudupu battle, which was a very decisive one, as you just mentioned, Ashley. So, the army commander at that time was Lieutenant General Sarath Fonseca. So, he was keeping a close eye on the developments in the battlefield. He very well realized the imminent danger. So, he wanted this gap to be sealed immediately. In military terminology, we call it counter-penetration. When enemy threatened to penetrate into our defenses, we had to deploy troops to counter it. This is usually done with your reserve troops. The army commander called me and tasked me with this job. Because at that time, most of the special forces troops were not engaged in battle in that particular place. They were elsewhere. And I remember that even General Kamal Gunratne also came there with 5-3 division, and General Jagat Das was placed in overall control of the situation. I know that a military expert might think that employing special forces on a task like this is simply against the principles of employment of special operations forces. But you know, General Fonseca, he had his own war-fighting doctrine. Very innovative, unorthodox, yet successful. Effective and successful. So, apart from that, this is a very crucial moment, and we needed to do something in desperation to prevent a total collapse of our defenses. So, the plan I grew up was to get one squadron of special forces, which is already in the front in that particular area, to go immediately and link up with the infantry battalions who suffered the LTT attack, and support them to hold the line and prevent further infiltration of or the penetration of the LTT into our defenses, into our area.
The intrusions.
Intrusions, exactly. And I asked my troops to somehow hold it for at least 12 hours, because I know that they did not have capability to hold more than that. Also depend on the ammunition and other material they had. And I wanted for them to hold, but for 12 hours I knew that I could get down reinforcement. That means other special forces squadrons from other places in the theatre of operation within that time. Time was also very crucial. We were running out of ammunition too. But terrorists didn't give us a breather. They continued to attack. So that I needed other troops as quickly as possible.
So perhaps at this stage it would have been a very close quarter battle as well.
It is a close quarter battle, intense battle. Sometimes you call it, in the military terminology, it's dogfight kind of thing in certain places. In the meantime, I coordinated with the Air Force to get 4 other SF squadrons airlifted to the area. Now each squadron had about strength of about 70 men. These squadrons were airlifted from places like Mana, Velioya, Vaunia to a place called Odusudan. Odusudan was few kilometers away from that particular battlefront, so that it was the closest and the safest location for helicopter landing. The Air Force actually did a remarkable job, and perhaps this was the instance I saw Air Force at its best. I don't know from where the helicopters came. There were a number of utility helicopters transporting our troops with their attack helicopters escorting them. The airlifting happened in shuttles, and in less than 6 hours I had my troops in Odusudan.
So what it says is decisive teamwork and the brilliance of everyone included. The military on the ground, Air Force in the air, all supporting and working together.
Yeah, it was within short notice that we had to do all that, but the understanding we have had with each other, inter-service cooperation, and all that paid off here. By now I have also, personally, my headquarter too had moved to Puduguruppu by road. So we immediately deployed these additional troops in those critical locations in the defense or in the line of fire. From that point onwards, it was intense fighting, continued for 3 days, and finally we got the better of LTT and we restored the situation. So actually this is the battle in recognition of which I was awarded the WWV or Veer Vikram Vibhushani.
General, this is absolutely mind-boggling what you would have gone through, marshalling your troops, making sure the resources are right, and fighting the battle, stopping the gaps, ensuring the infiltration stops, and the continued momentum of the Sri Lankan army in annihilating the LTT. Now, this was a very, very special moment for you, and I'm sure this recognition medal, which you won in as gallantry in the battlefield, must hold a very special place in your heart. But we see so many other colleagues that have been awarded to you as well. And we see as a SF officer, you have even been awarded Golden Eagle Badge of the Special Forces as well. Now, are these also something very special to you?
Yeah, Golden Eagle badge awarded by the SF is something very special because survival in the SF is very tough. It's not just to do the basic course and qualify and enter the Special Forces, have a smooth run. No. You have to perform to survive in that special unit. In the SF, those who successfully serve for 2 years get a Bronze Eagle, and for 5 years get a Silver Eagle, and for 8 years get a Golden Eagle. These are service appreciations granted for living up to that particular period. You have to live up to an SF member.
So these are wonderful achievements indeed. Dear listeners, this is a straight from the heart exclusive discussion with Major General Nirmal Dharmaratne, an officer who performed right out there in the middle, making sure that our future is protected. General, there were 2 other very important campaigns during your operation time, but the Marachi campaign.
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate a little on that?
Those who took part in Vadamarachi campaign was also awarded a medal. I was lucky to get that medal too. That operation was held in 1986. That was the biggest first ever operation in the history of Ilam Bose. In mid-80s, Ilam War was literally restricted to Jaffna Peninsula. Jaffna Peninsula has 3 administrative areas: Tennamarachi, Vadamarachi and Walikama. So Vadamarachi had most of the heavily fortified LTT camps. Even LTT leader Prabhakaran's birthplace is Vellatithure, which is also in Vadamarachi. Prabhakaran even had said at that time, if he loses Vellatithure, he would give up. He would give up fighting for the cause he was fighting. So I took part in the Vadamarachi operation as a platoon command in Vanchia.
And then, General, the Riveras Medal, I'm sure this is something very special to you as well.
Yeah, it is another special medal because, in my opinion, this is the greatest of all the limited military operations during my time in the army. The operation ended with army liberating the entire Jaffna Peninsula, and we managed to push the remaining terrorists into Vanni jungles. But we made a mistake there. The mistake we did was that, had we not made a mistake, the war would have been ended in 1995. The mistake we did was, we did not go after the terrorists into the jungle. We should have gotten our commandos and special forces to destroy them in the Vanni jungles. We did it, but I don't think we did it adequately. So this was a lesson learned by us. We did not bring the battle to the enemy's territory. So LTT had complete freedom inside the jungle to regroup and counterattack. That is what exactly they did in 1997, overrunning Mullaitivu. Just look at what's happening in Afghanistan and Iraq. The US-led coalition forces are fighting, not in US, they are fighting the Al-Qaeda in their own territory. In Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda and Taliban. So the day they stop it and withdraw, these people will regroup and come and attack the US. So in an insurgency, forces must be offensive and bring the fight to their own areas, insurgents' areas.
Well, gallantry, brilliance, strategy. How fortunate we are to listen to all these being related with first-hand information. Well, dear listeners, your privilege as well. Exclusively and for the first time, only for our listenership. General, It's a well-known secret how much you have strived to maintain the lowest possible profile with hardly an outward appearance throughout your exemplary military career. And even now, during your post-service life. But now, addition to your comrades in the military, I think it's quite important, at least to some extent, for the general public of this country who sincerely appreciated your selfless service and commitment that enabled our country to survive those dark days and today experience, enjoy and live in freedom. So these are all absolute special achievements for which we are very truly grateful. I think I myself and our listeners will fail in our duty if I don't take this opportunity to remember and thank from the bottom of our hearts the family members of all the military personnel in this moment as well. One can imagine and feel what the parents, family members, spouses and the children would have had to undergo during all these years of uncertainty. And now, these are unspoken, perhaps to an extent the forgotten heroes to whom we owe for their part of the sacrifice as well. A very interesting, emotional but a proud moment for all of us. As we end this second part of the discussion with Major General Nirmal Dharmaratne, do stay tuned for more insights and all on the other side of this break.
State service is a service to the nation. Do your part for the nation at large.
Welcome back, dear listeners. Yes, as we come back to the studios of the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation, we are talking exclusively and live with Major General Nirmal Dharmaratne. General, so many medals which you have won with a lot of gallantry which are shown in the military front. Can you explain the significance?
Yes, on our shirt, on the uniform shirt, we wear our medals, badges and insignias. Medals are worn on the upper left side of the uniform shirt, close to your heart. And the other badges, such as the parachute badge, they are worn on the upper right side of the shirt. When one soldier meets another, they peek at each other's medals and badges.
Okay.
Now this is called read in the chest.
Okay.
So by reading the chest of a serviceman when he is in uniform, you can understand his background, his expertise and his past achievements.
That's absolutely brilliant indeed. That's something I'm sure many of our listeners would not have known unless you are from a military background yourself. General, it has been absolutely brilliant to talk to you and also listen to all what you have been explaining to us so far. Now, a little bit more personal in our questions. Digging back a little as to how all this began, can we know a little about your past, your school, your youth, and of course, very importantly, your family?
Yes, talking about my life before joining the army, yes. I think I have had a wonderful school career. My school days at Dharmaratne College, it has given me a lot of fond memories. I always love to recall them whenever I meet another schoolmate. At school, actually, for extracurricular activities, I did a lot of sports like rugby, hockey and football. And I was also a member of the cadetting platoon.
And quickly a reminder to all our listeners, Dharmaraja, one of the premier Buddhist schools with a history of more than 125 years, founded by Sir Henry Steele Olcott in 1887 as a Kandy Buddhist high school. It was known at then with a number of students now exceeding 4,000 with a academic staff of more than 192.
Exactly, Ashley. Actually, I'm really proud and particularly that I was able to study at Dharmaratne College. Also, I studied in an era when the most respected legendary principal, Mr. A.P. Gunaratne, was at school, along with a host of other great teachers. Then about my joining the army, it was straight from school. There was no gap between the end of my school career and the beginning of my military career. I left the school in December 1984 and straight away joined the army in January 1985. And about my married life, I was 33 years old when I married. So my commitments in the army prevented me marrying early. Nevertheless, I'm happy that even having been delayed, I found the best life's partner for me. I met my wife Roshani in 1997, and she had by then just entered the Kalani University as an undergraduate of Bachelor of Science. So after a few months of association, we thought that we have many things in common. We can get along, and our likes and dislikes are similar. So we married on the Valentine's Day in 1998.
How cool is that? Very romantic as well.
Since our marriage, actually, it's been a very tough time for both of us because most of the time I was away, especially to raise our 3 children, Miyushi, Leomi, and Hansi. But I think now we have passed the tough time. Although I hung my uniform, Roshani continues to work. She has a very tough routine. She leaves for work as early as 6:30 in the morning, dropping children to school, and returns home very late as 7 in the evening. Yet she doesn't neglect her responsibilities of 3 children.
Well, you're certainly right. Working for a blue chip company as a senior manager, and of course, we all know what the spouses of military personnel go through as well. The uncertainty during those terrible times when war rages in a country or anywhere else for that matter, and the commitment and of course the responsibilities which is very much a part of their day-to-day lives and on their shoulders as well. Well, General, I've had the privilege of talking to a few of your classmates during the time that you were in school as well. You have been found to be a very mischievous student in school, and more often than not in the class. Would you like to explain a little about that as well?
Actually, I don't know who are these classmates of mine whom you have met. But
I'm going to keep those names away from you because they told me one thing is don't disclose our names to General.
I can suspect, but to be honest, they haven't lied to you. Yes, I was a bit mischievous at school because my involvements in sports and cadetting kept myself away from the classroom to some extent. I thought that during school time, one should not restrict oneself only to studies, but one should always, as much time and opportunity permits, engage in other activities as well. Because this will help you to get varied experience in life. You will be able to develop many other competencies through these co-curricular activities, which studies alone will not give you. These things will benefit you, will come in very handy later on in your life.
Well, parents, dear listeners, if that's very wise words which has been spoken by General Nirmal Dharmaratne, that the extracurricular activities play a huge important part of shaping the life of your children. It's not all academics, they need to do those extra things as well. Any special memories of cadetting and rugby days?
As for cadetting, being runners-up in the Herman Championship in 1982 was memorable. We practiced very hard and the selection was very, very competitive to get into the platoon. I would like to fondly remember our cadetting master, Major Kohana, and our platoon sergeant was Vidyasagar. And about rugby, beating St. Anthony's College in 1984 under my captaincy, and beating Royal College in 1993, top rugby player in schools. They were very proud moments, actually.
Well, absolutely. General, I was wondering whether I should ask you this question, but for obvious reasons. You being a cadet, a rugby player, but in the interest of our listeners, you had the options of selecting any career for yourself as you were just about to leave school. Why the army?
Yeah, there are a couple of reasons. Actually, my joining the army was mainly influenced by my cadetting masters at school, Lieutenant Colonel Kohana and Mr. Mathararaj. They were so inspiring that they always said that school cadetting is the first step of becoming an army officer, or for that matter, even a Navy or Air Force. So the other reason is that in 1980s, after school career, very few wanted to enter university. We wanted a job immediately. So there were 3 professions which were popular among the school leavers. I remember it was firstly to be an executive in the private sector. And second option could be to become a sub-inspector in the police. And the third one was an officer in the armed forces. So having done cadetting, and I began to adore the uniform. So I chose the army, but somewhat against the wish of my parents, for obvious reason, because this was the period the separatist terrorism was raising its ugly head. My parents anyhow consented to me joining the army, thinking that by the time we finished our military training, the armed conflict would be
have
over.
phased out.
But it never happened, so as you know.
Splendid, General Nirmal Dharmaratne. Goodness me, Sri Lanka Army and we, the general public of this country, so fortunate you made that decision, and I'm sure that's where the writing on the wall for the annihilation of evil terrorism was made. Yes, time for another break, and when we return on the other side with more excitement and nerve-tingling, harrowing stories to follow, do stay tuned.
To serve the public with honor and dedication, where the nation is the heart of the people. The State Service of Sri Lanka, serving with honor and care.
Welcome back, listeners. Continuing from where we left, General Nirmal Dharmaratne. A quick look at your military career from the time you enlisted as an officer cadet in 1985 and commissioned in 1986. Gajaba Regiment would have been grueling training, I'm sure, during those days.
Yes, on being enlisted in the regular force of the Sri Lanka Army, I was taken into the 20th intake or the 20th batch of officer cadets for training. Then we had to go to Dietalawa, where the Sri Lanka Military Academy is, for this tough 18 months of training. Training was mainly focused on more than giving military knowledge. It was military knowledge, but more on molding us for military life, making us to become leaders and officers. So this was a transformation. This transformation was very tough. It was a mental agony rather than physical. Because physically at that age we were fit, having done sports and cadetting and all that. But this course really tested your mental endurance. Many sleepless nights, having to do too many things in too little time, punishments even for a single mistake, all that to focus on conditioning us so that we could get used to the hazards in the battlefield. And talking about this initial training time, I would like to remember with gratitude our instructors at that time who laid a good foundation on us. Our chief instructor was Major Nihal Marambe. Our course commander was Captain Chai Fernando. And the other instructors, Major Rohani Duru, Major Gamini Balasuri, Captain Rohan Jayasinghe. They guided us through the course successfully. So then, after we passed out, being commissioned as second lieutenants, I was posted to the Gajaba Regiment and my military career began from there.
Now, during this period, this regiment was commanded by that iconic infantry commander, late Major General Vijay Vimalaratne. Then he was a lieutenant colonel. The second in command was the present president, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, then a major. Any special memories you like to share?
That's a great question. Late General Vimalaratne, he was a colonel at that time and he commanded the 1st Battalion of the Gajaba Regiment, in which I was a platoon commander. And his deputy was Major Gotabaya Rajapaksa. So late General Vimalaratne is considered the father of the Gajaba Regiment. He was a brilliant field commander. The legacy he left behind in the regiment, or perhaps in the army too, has not been repealed yet. He was very tough, but was kind too. And actually one of the things I learned from him was that being tough does not mean being ruthless or being arrogant, but just being firm, fair and sympathetic. And talking about Lieutenant Colonel Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the rank he held at the time he retired, he was of course in the unit those days, more or less a quiet, mild-mannered, modest, yet very brave in battle. I remember the way he led a battle group in this particular operation, Operation Liberation, to capture Prabhakaran's hideout or the stronghold in Vellatiture. He was outstanding. He led us from the front.
What wonderful memories. Then immediately afterwards, as a firebrand, fearless young lieutenant, you joined the Elite Special Force Regiment, which was founded by Major General Gamini Hetarachi. Finally, you went on to command and was a found member in 2007 of the Special Forces as well. Why and how?
I joined the Special Forces at its formation in 1988. By then, I had completed 2 years with the Gajaba Regiment. I was a lieutenant. So while serving in the Gajaba Regiment, I was in Trincomalee at that time. I remember the news came that the Special Forces is going to be formed. And the Army Headquarters is looking for young officers volunteering to join it. When I heard that, I didn't have second thoughts in raising my hand. In fact, Ashley, to be frank with you, just after joining the Army, my dream was to become a commando, the cream of the fighting units of an army. But I was denied of that opportunity because of a knee injury. So in the Special Forces, we had many good comrades. Our commanding officer and founding father, General Gamini Hettiarachchi, is one. He, in my opinion, perhaps the most respected senior officer in the army. My entire military life thereafter was greatly influenced by him. He was a role model for me, and I to date emulate him a lot. We in fact missed him to be the commander of our army. Such an honest, dedicated gentleman officer. Ashley, you asked me how I received Deshaputra Sammani medal. This medal is awarded to those who get wounded in battle. In my early days in the Special Forces, I was wounded in 2 occasions in the battlefield. Once during a rescue operation in Mandatiu, Jaffna, and the other instance was fighting in the Mullatiu jungles. So, as you mentioned that later in my career I was able to command all Special Forces unit in the final phase of the Ilam War from 2007 to 2009. I think I got this opportunity as I remain loyal to that organization, the Special Forces. I want to highlight a point here that one should remain loyal to the organization you serve, no matter what. Only then you will be able to rise in that organization. If you keep on criticizing the organization or its shortcomings, I doubt whether you will get a promising career in the organization you serve. Just
Some
as
special words here, General, to all our young listeners. Loyalty, very important.
Yes, Ashley. Just as no single person is perfect, no single organization is also perfect. So, talking about the role of Special Forces during the 4th Elam War in the north, they operated in the entire battlefield. That means, when I say entire battlefield, the area extending from Mana in the west to Valio in the east, about 100 kilometers, and from Vaunia in the south to Elephant Pass in the north, another 100 kilometers. So SF, as Special Forces are normally referred as SF, they operated in 4 men, small teams of 4 men, 6 men or 8 men. They quite regularly, frequently infiltrated into the LTT controlled areas and attacked the terrorists in their own backyard. So we carried out a range of operations from ambushes, raids, reconnaissance, demolitions, sniping, surveillances. So SF operations in the areas of LTT caused a severe impact on the LTT leadership. The terrorist leaders were frightened to come forward to lead their cadres because we ambushed and killed a lot of LTT leaders at that time, their frontline leaders. Particularly our LRP teams. LRP means long range patrols. They are cream within the Special Forces. They were very effective. Their attacks on LTT caused a devastating blow on the LTT leadership. They were completely destabilized. Prabhakaran had to live in hiding. He could not come out and freely move about. LTD had to use thousands of reserve cadres to defend their camps, gun positions, their artillery positions, their airfields against the small-scale attacks of special forces. So this is how we operated in the depth, and operating in the depth is not an easy task. To take some targets, we spent weeks. For an example, if a target has to be taken in a particular area, say a location about 30 kilometers inside the enemy territory, we have to first establish food caches and ammunition caches in the target area, around that area. Caching is hiding or storage of food and other material that is required for operations like claymore mines or ammunitions in a safe place in the battlefield for future use. Now, these cache patrols would take a week or more. Then, when they return, it will be followed by a reconnaissance patrol or surveillance patrol. They go and collect information about the target area, the vital information required to plan operations. And they also take a few days. And when they return, we plan out how to do that. And then the striking patrol will go. So these follow-on patrols do not have to carry much weight because we have already stored our requirements in the target area. So that is why, Ashley, I always say that special forces played a decisive role in the overall success of the war. But it is quite normal that they don't get adequately appreciated. It's not fault of anyone. It's just that they don't get noticed enough.
Well, dear listeners, there you have heard it straight from the heart, and also the true account of what actually goes in a battlefield from a point of a military strategy, and then also the commitment of these brave soldiers who have put their life on the edge for our sake. Well, we have listened to all that. Now, General, during this time, you also started to follow special courses as well, like parachuting, halo skydiving, and so on and so forth. What was the importance of all this?
Because I served in the special forces, I got a lot of opportunities to follow specialized courses. And my experience in the skydiving area is unique. And because we have skydivers with 1,000 jumps even, but I managed to complete 200 jumps. So I haven't heard of a serving general in my age completing 200 jumps.
Absolutely brilliant indeed.
So, in my team of skydivers in the army, there are a lot of talents. They include both male and female. We have multiple skills. We acquired those skills basically through foreign training. We were able to train ourselves in the United Kingdom, UAE, Germany, Austria. And we acquired multiple parachuting disciplines. So, if you want me to elaborate a little about what is this parachuting skills, I could.
We would love to, General, but unfortunately time is catching up. But we have a few more very important things to ask as well. Now, with everything happening and the war raging, you somehow found time to academically groom yourself as well. The most challenging course for middle grade officers, you became the second officer, or rather you became the second in order of merit among the students from 3 services to receive the degree of Master of Science in Defense Studies from the degree awarding institution, the University of California. How come?
You know, Ashley, that's something that I realized in the early stages of my career, that no matter how skillful you are in physical activities, unless you qualify academically too, you will not be a complete person. But this is an arguable point. In fact, the Army facilitated me a great deal to follow these courses. Of course, finding time for studies while serving was simply a nightmare. But I somehow did. And to tell you, there are many other senior officers who have even doctorates. So the armed forces look after you very well, not only just getting you to fight in the battlefield.
Well, you certainly are. General, you're hailed as a skilled public speaker as well. And you have delivered speeches at many local and international forums, United Nations Conference on Security of Radioactive Material held in Vienna in 2018, 2011, the National Defense Seminar held in Colombo, and so on and so forth. I'm sure a lot of preparation would have gone into these as well.
Yes, delivering a public speech doesn't come easy. There is a lot of hard work. Preparation of the script has to be done craftily. So always, as far as I'm concerned, when I do a speech, I begin with something to create interest of the audience. And at the end, you should leave the audience with some thoughts, something to take away. In the middle, there should be a lot of varieties, like that is also to maintain the interest that you create at the beginning. You can have humor, you can have idioms, stories, etc. But the delivery is the most important thing. Keeping eye contact with the audience, use of audio visuals, avoiding negative mannerisms at some points. But let me tell you, Ashley, no matter how well you have prepared the script, no matter how well you have planned to use your different media, audio visuals and methods and all that, you must deliver the speech with power, with energy. It is not just shouting, but loud enough to be heard by the audience. Talk to the audience, not to the microphone.
Now, what this says is if that one has a focus and the want, nothing is impossible. Well, let's hope our young listeners, yes, you are tuned to live, straight from the heart discussion with General Dharmaratne. Do stay tuned as we come back after this break.
By the people, for the people. The state service where the nation is the center.
Yes, as we return, a welcome to all our listeners just tuning in. You're listening to a live account of how things happened during the war period in our country and how dedicated patriotic heroes like General Nirmal Dharmaratne and all of the ranks of servicemen from military and the police faced up to those difficult times. And this is, yes, a life story, so to say, of one of them. Do listen carefully. Well, as much as we talk of all the successes, there are, of course, were the difficult ones as well. We all know in 2000, that was the year 2000, when Elephant Pass fell. You yourself almost had a fatal experience due to dehydration when you volunteered for the rescue operation. Sad memories, General?
Elephant Pass battle in April 2000 was a debacle, a complete disaster. It is, I would say, an agonizing part of the military history of Sri Lanka. The biggest loss our army suffered, next to being overrun in Mullaitivu. At that time, I was in Ayakachi, commanding the 3rd Battalion of the Gajava Regiment, and I was serving under 5-4 Division, which defended Elephant Pass area. So actually, the army was preparing to launch a major attack on LTT base in Metlakeni at that time. But the LTT, having known our intentions, they preempted our plan by attacking our defenses from a number of locations. So they continued to attack for about 3 days continuously. And finally, they managed to break our defenses from Palle and Champion Pattu areas. So 5-4 Division was separated from the rest of the troops in the Jaffna Peninsula. Thousands of troops were completely cut off from food, cut off from ammunition, cut off from all sorts of supplies. So it was so unfortunate I was also there. So the only option was to withdraw and link up with the rest of the troops in the peninsula. So withdrawal was planned by the division. We had to withdraw a distance about 20 kilometers. That was very hard. Actually, you had to fight our way through. Had we not planned that withdrawal at that point, we knew that we all would have got wiped out by the LTT. Unfortunately, this withdrawal was conducted in complete violation of warfighting principles. That is why it became a failure. It was done in haste, without proper coordination, done at midday under hot sun. That is why many soldiers suffered dehydration. Not that there was no water, When you were fired upon, you were not going to fetch water from a well or a lagoon. It was done when the morale of the troops was very low. And worst of all, the entire division, having about 6,000 troops, moved along a very narrow passage, about 50 meters wide. So how could a division maneuver in such a small area? With Kilali Lagoon on one side and a Palmyra Grove on the other side, we simply offered LTT an easy target.
Shooting targets, so to say.
Exactly. They killed hundreds of us, sometimes firing at us from very close range. LTT came in boats across the lagoon and fired at us. They directed mortars on us from Punareen. Firing came at us from all directions. There was no difference in rank. Even the junior-most private soldier to the general officer, all faced the same threat. Whoever got shot fell to the ground. Others kept running. Hardly one could help another. Even the deputy division commander, Brigadier Percy Fernand, 2 of us got killed. It was such a pathetic scene. But we learned from mistakes. The reason why we could completely annihilate LTT later on, because we learned from our mistakes.
Debacle, very sad memory indeed. But time again for one more break, which incidentally will be the final one. Dear listeners, do stay tuned as we unravel the humanitarian operation which finally wiped out terrorism from our country. Our discussion is with General Nirmal Dharmaratne. Stay tuned.
To serve the public with honor and dedication, where the nation is the heart of the people. The State Service of Sri Lanka, serving with honor and care.
Welcome back. Though regrettably, time is catching up. Time to squeeze in the most important phase of your military successes. General Nirmal Dharmaratne, now the important decision made and going into the critical phase of meeting various threats under your command. The special forces, the covert operations behind the enemy lines, which finally rang the death toll for the terrorists, also gave the tagline to our SF as the best fighters in the world. Needless to say, many sacrifices too happened. Anything special you recall and would like to share with us?
There are, of course, many such instances. But most of the SF operations are not known to the public. They are not simply publicized because we have our own operational ethics. But the ones that linger in my mind always is these 5 air rescue missions. During the war, there were 5 instances of rescuing SF teams from danger by the Air Force from the battlefield. Because our small teams or our patrols who operated inside the LTT controlled territory in the Wani jungles, they got into trouble so that they had to be rescued by air. In most cases, they had casualties. These were extremely critical movements. All 5 air rescue missions were successful. I think it was purely due to the understanding the special forces had with the Air Force, because they have been trained together. They have been rehearsed in such situations in their joint training. So I don't think that any other Air Force would extricate teams from such dangerous situations in the battlefield. But I'm glad that our Air Force did.
In conclusion, in order to educate our listeners more than any other reason, in addition to defeating terrorism, our military as well as the government was under severe pressure from world powers, particularly the diaspora, even threatening to mediate and save the terrorists from annihilation. Now, during this period, you took postings as Defence Attaché of UK. I'm sure you would have been tested to the maximum during this period as well.
When I served as a Defence Attaché in London at the Sri Lanka High Commission, the LTT's military capability has been almost completely defeated by us. But there are proxies within the Tamil diaspora. You know, the diaspora is around the world. They are the ones who basically funded the LTT. They were highly worried. They probably have felt humiliated and they were sort of hopeless. So they were desperate to do something. And particularly in the month of May, 2009, days before the death of Prabhakaran. So the LTT sympathizers in those countries, especially in the UK, they made many desperate attempts to get the support of the governments of those countries to intervene into our battle and save the LTT leadership. You remember, no? Even the UK and France sent their foreign ministers to Sri Lanka to negotiate. So it was really tough time for us to convince the British government about what exactly was happening in the battlefield. Because there was so much misinformation by the Tamil diaspora saying that there's a genocide taking place, Sri Lanka army is raping women, so that the international community should intervene and all that. So at the embassy, the diplomats there, we had to work very hard to counter this malicious propaganda of the LTT. Even false reports by some UK media organizations, I remember, like the Channel 4. So there are a lot of protests, particularly around the High Commission. So London was another battlefield. But finally, I must say that thanks to the able diplomatic staff at the embassy, also with the help of some of the die-hard Sri Lankans who live there, we managed to control the situation.
Dear listeners, well, there you heard it. As it happened, how our country and our nation was saved. And well, time has caught up and time for goodbyes, but not before we say it has been an absolute privilege and an honor to have you in our studio and to listen firsthand to some of the experience which I'm sure is a first time for many of our listeners. I'm certain this interview has brought many patriotic feelings amongst all our listeners, particularly the young generation. On behalf of Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation, Radio Sri Lanka, and all our listeners, our best wishes to you. Thank you for joining Straight from the Heart, and wish you all our listeners a pleasant evening and God's blessings. And from me, Ashley Ratnayaka, a big thank you as always. Until next time.
Thank you very much, Ashley. It's been a pleasure to take part in this program. It's in fact was an honor than a pleasure. Thank you.
Straight from the Heart, fortnightly on Radio Sri Lanka of the airwaves of Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation, as we feature exclusively outstanding Sri Lankan personalities in the field of sports, business, health, education and a host of professions. Understand their success stories. No holds barred, straight from the heart. Do tune in this coming Sunday, 7 p.m. onwards to Radio Sri Lanka on frequencies 97.4 and 97.6 with your host, Ashley Ratnayaka.